What I want to do now is introduce the guest that I have here because he's dear to my heart and dear to a lot of people in the community. We're going to talk just some quick overview about what's going on, what's happened. And both Ray and I work every day in the energy industry, and we're being hammered with calls and interest in battery backup and generators and solar. And what we've realized is that there needs to be a way to get some quick basic info out to everybody because we're answering the same questions repeatedly over and over, and it's not a quick conversation. And it literally is every few minutes. If you're a local energy company, it's walk-ins, it's calls, it's emails. And so as we start this new monthly series, I want to introduce to the airwaves Mr. Ray Darby, who is a co-founder and the main cheese and heart and soul behind Sustainable Energy Group, longtime local contractor that focuses on solar energy efficiency. They do generators now, but Ray is more than that. And when I first moved here more than 20 years ago, I was introduced to this great guy, and the longer I got to talk with him, the more I realized he knows about electric vehicles. He's owned several different electric vehicles. He knows solar electric on and off grid. He knows batteries. He's got a small hydro setup for his home. He's got solar hot water. And this gentleman that I'm bringing in the airwaves, in a previous life, completely created, executed, and ran a statewide incentive rebate program for reducing energy use on commercial buildings. So he knows a lot about all of the stuff people are talking about. So I'm pleased to bring to the airwaves and the Energy Report Mr. Ray Darby. Hi, Ray. Thanks for making time.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Martin.
So you're being bombarded just like we are, and you and I have talked a couple of times on the phone about it and how difficult it is to keep up with the sudden interest that everyone has, and it's difficult to keep up with some of the chaotic scrambling that our community is doing and looking for answers.
Right.
So what's your take on the approach? Do you think that that there is some soundness to we should start by talking about individuals and their needs and immediate term and then worry about the longer term? Because I'm concerned about all of this being confused and put together. What's your thought on how to deal with this situation and how it's impacting you?
Well, I think you did a pretty good job of describing it. It's sort of like an onion. We have the day-to-day need to help fulfill people's current needs. At the same time, we need to keep our peepers focused on what's coming down the pike in the way of new battery technologies, et cetera. And we have a relatively limited amount of time, and this is kind of a huge and very complex topic. We in the industry have invested an enormous amount of time looking at the many alternatives over the years, and then especially lately because there's been a lot of changes in the industry. New battery technologies, new inverter technologies, the equipment that works between the solar and the batteries. There's been a lot of changes, and so at the same time we're dealing with this rush of people trying to get the 30% tax credit before it drops a measly 4% to 26% next year, which is also, that factor is also, blown us up, right? We're booked out months in advance. And then we have the PSPS BS, as I like to call it. I hope I can say that on the radio.
Yes.
And that has just literally lit our phones up like Christmas trees. And here we are trying to deal with this enormous amount of work. We hired a couple guys, new guys Monday. We got a couple more guys in the wings. We just can't keep up. And just like you, it's days, nights, and weekends. I see you up the middle of the night posting stuff.
It's you and me, man.
I'm beginning to wonder if you ever sleep. But it's a huge and complex topic. And kind of in anticipation of these PSPSs coming down the pike, we began a series of articles in our monthly newsletter back in June to help educate people on the options.
Which probably at the time, folks were like, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Let's wait until it's immediately upon us, and don't get me started on climate change because it's got a lot of analogies. But the newsletter has and is going to continue to cover the topic of backup power, as well as a variety of other topics related to sustainability, things like energy efficiency, sustainable building options, sustainable farming, things like that. We've also covered the generator issue and have 2 articles in the October newsletter on the subject. And we've not everybody gets our newsletter, so we've published all of these articles on our website blog as well at SEG.energy. Super simple to remember. And I don't know if S's and F's are coming through, but it's S for sustainable, E for energy, G for group, .energy, no comms or anything in there. So yeah, over the last 40 years, I moved up here in 79, and I've invested a huge amount of time educating people on efficiency in solar. You remember the articles I used to write for the union for years. So while the PSPS BS has our workload and empathy meters pegged, we see it as driving interest in action towards becoming more self-sufficient and resilient as individuals, as a community, and I think it's a national issue as well. We got the Green New Deal and things like that.
And the tagline for this radio series is the public shutoffs from surviving to thriving. And I think that's the other thing that you and I really want to see is using this opportunity to actually foster some good long-term change. Everyone wants that.
Yeah, there's a silver lining to this thing. Exactly. So anyway, that said, this mad rush to generators is really concerning for a variety of reasons. There's a lot to it. So I'd refer people to our blog for more on that. In particular, you mentioned generator safety. We had 2 articles on generators in the October issue, and one had all to do with safety, just a whole list of things, do's and don'ts. And there's also a mad rush to solar and batteries. Mm-hmm. Either new solar with battery backup or adding battery backup to an existing system, since the vast majority of the solar systems out there don't provide any power during an outage, which we try to educate people on thoroughly, but they forget, and hey, how come I don't have power,
Mm-hmm. There will be a solar show in the future where we'll cover everything solar.
Awesome. So anyway, in the case of solar, battery backup may, in some cases, make more sense than a generator. But it really depends on a variety of factors before we can really decide. And I'll just run through them real quick.
Go for it. Yeah.
And this isn't a complete list.
So this is a list for listeners to help put some more educated thought into whether batteries or generator, if they must have backup power, because that's a whole other conversation. If they really want backup power, generators versus batteries, this is your list of guiding principles.
Yeah, and some of these things apply just to battery backup. And keep in mind, too, that you can have basically a giant UPS, uninterruptible power supply you mentioned earlier.
Batteries without solar.
Yeah.
Just battery backup instead of generator. Yeah.
In fact, a good friend of mine is doing just that, even though she's got a giant solar system and could have put batteries in for about the same cost as she spent on one of those little Yeti units with the inverter and had to go out and charge it with her generator. But anyway, be that as it may, first and foremost, the building owner needs to decide what they need to back up, or what they want to back up, as long as cost is no issue. If cost is no issue, we can back up the whole neighborhood.
Yeah.
You got enough money. But most people aren't in that position. And then the second most important question is, how much do you want or are willing to spend?
Yes.
And there's a lot of people that can't even afford a generator.
Right.
And so the Martin Webb approach, wherein you filled up your bathtub and bought ice and put it in an ice chest and so on and so forth, very creative approach to having, limited resources.
Renters for life.
Yeah. And so that's what a lot of renters can do.
Yeah.
So another big piece of the puzzle is how big are the electrical loads that you're backing up. And that might be a little bit Greek to some people, but a load is the watts, the power of whatever you're going to be using. So, for example, a refrigerator might use 124 watts when it's running, but it might need 6 times that to start up, like 780 watts. So that's an important consideration.
The surge is
that's called surge load. And it's a factor with anything that has a motor, like a well pump, washer, dryer, dishwasher, air conditioner, anything with a motor in it.
So first step is whittle down what do you absolutely need to run that needs energy, and then how much power does each item require to turn on?
Right. And then in the case of batteries, how long are those things going to be running for? So, for example, a refrigerator might run half time. And so because batteries are rated in terms of how much power they can deliver over time, that is watts and hours, and you simply multiply the two together and you get watt hours. So in this case, this 124 watt, when it's running refrigerator, you multiply that by 12 if it's running half time, and you need about 1,500 watt hours in a day. So 15 watt hours, 1,500 watt hours. What's the capacity of this battery? And you kind of do a comparison. When you're looking at a whole house, you got to add up all those things, and that takes some time. And then if we're doing a system like that, then we're generally, because of that cost thingy, not backing up the entire house or neighborhood, just what we call critical loads, fulfilling the needs. And so then the next question is, well, how long do you want to be doing this for?
Right. How many days are you?
It's 1,500 watt hours in a day, or you're looking at 2 days, 3 days.
Right.
You're looking at bigger and bigger battery banks.
Right.
And those are just some of the considerations.
Let me put something interesting really quick in the listeners' ears, though, about that cost. So 1,500 watt hours is 1.5 kilowatt hours, right?
Right.
1.5 kilowatt hours. So to provide 3 kilowatt hours a day for somebody, is it correct to say that the cost of that equipment installation would run in the thousands of dollars?
It could.
Not hundreds of dollars to provide like 3 kilowatt hours.
And I don't even want to get into do-it-yourself opportunities where you buy the batteries off the shelf and a little inverter from,
Right. Well, but here's the point I'm headed at, though, is 3 kilowatt hours from PG&E is like $1 or less. So some people are looking to spend thousands of dollars, or sometimes tens of thousands of dollars, to provide the equivalent of a few dollars of power from PG&E. So if it's an economic play, there probably isn't a payback. It definitely needs to be, you need power. If people are like...
Yeah, there's a couple of other considerations. I mean, you're right,
Can you do without those 3 kilowatt hours is my point.
Well, and let's put it in relative terms, too. What does an average home in California use? Something like
22, 25, 28,
28 kilowatt hours a day, I think, is kind of the average. So, yeah, it's not a lot of kilowatt hours.
Right.
And, so when you're looking at batteries, and as you know, I have a battery backup grid tie system myself. I primarily use it just for backups. I've had my power out for as long as 10 days. November of 2010, right around Thanksgiving, and all the lines in my neighborhood went down, as well as a line coming from the transformer down to my house, which was, of course, PG&E's last priority. they're trying to get the whole darn neighborhood up and rake and wait, right?
Yeah.
So after 3 days, I ran out of battery juice. So I had to fire up a little generator. You had a super efficient little generator. And within, a few hours, my batteries were all charged up again. And then I coasted along another 3 days. And then the sun started to come out. And I thought, well, I'm going to go out there and shovel that 4 feet of snow off my solar panels. And boy, oh boy, when solar panels are cold, do they put out the juice. And so I was able to coast the remaining, 4 days until PG&E got around to fixing my own supply, just running off the sun.
Right. So in your list so far, it's what do you need, and whittle it down. How much power do those items require to turn on and operate, and how many hours will they be on? Because you could have an item that uses a lot of power, but it only needs to be run for 15 minutes a day, or you could have something that's being run constantly. Right.
And there's another factor, too, and that is in the case of solar, as you know, we go on a time of use rate. So how much we pay for electricity depends on what time of day we're using it. So in most cases, with most people, that's like between 4 and 8. It costs more money. So what you can do with a battery system when the grid's on is utilize it for more than just backup when the grid's down. When the grid's on, you can say to the system, I don't want to pay that super high rate for power. The 4 months out of the year they count as, quote, summer, unquote. I want to go off my batteries, and then I'll charge them back up with solar tomorrow. And then that way you avoid those high costs during those peak, what they call peak periods. So there's an advantage to that. That alone doesn't generally, justify the cost of batteries. But it certainly helps save money. And then, the rest of the cost you can kind of chalk up or justify to having backup power.
I want to stick to your list of generators versus batteries, though, because now we're talking about how you can leverage time of use rates when this is all about PG&E's gone.
Right.
What do people need to know to figure out what's best for their situation? And everyone's looking at generators versus batteries. And I still think, and you and I have talked about this, there's a big place for efficiency so that you might not even need much, if any, backup power. But let's stick with the generator versus batteries. What people need to know right now that will help when they call where you work and where I work and other people work. How can they be better ready and educated when they call us with this info?
Well, this is just a fraction of the info that's available on our blog. Like I said, since June, we've been trying to cover all the different options in a little bit more detail. At the same time, acknowledging that there's a whole lot more to it than that. But at least we're giving people the things that they need to be thinking about if they're interested in a generator or a just batteries or solar with batteries, etc. The only other thing that I would add, though, before we go to the generator topic, which there's kind of a lot to that as well,
And again, we're going to have a whole show on batteries. We're going to have a whole show on generators. So everyone, please stay tuned. Energy Report does have a Facebook page where we'll be posting as we line up our shows what we're going to focus on. But what's the high level? If you just had the quick information, what do people need to know about batteries versus generators, and whether that's something they should be looking at?
Well, you mentioned some of the downsides of generators being that they don't like to be run constantly all the time. If it's a gasoline generator, refueling it can be a little bit of an issue, if you want to keep it running. Serious safety concern. There's a whole lot to say about the safety issues associated with portable generators. In my neighborhood, there's generators everywhere. The noise is really, really annoying. So there's that. And not only do you pay for a generator, but you pay for the fuel and you pay for the maintenance. And I know I've heard from a lot of folks with generators that are running off of natural gas, which is one of our cheapest forms of energy source, almost too cheap to meter like nuclear. but they're racking up, $100 a day bills because they've got this gigantic generator. And one of the interesting characteristics about the big generators and the smaller ones that have inverters built in don't really suffer from this issue. But part of the reason why it's really important to pick the right size generator is that they're typically not running at their full capacity. And even at half load, which is still a lot for a generator that's sized to, cover these surge loads we were talking about a minute ago. Even at half load, they're consuming anywhere from 60 to maybe 65% of the fuel that they do when they're operating at full load. And then the vast majority of the time, they're not even operating at half load. They're way below that. And so you're just burning through all kinds of fuel that's just creating heat and pollution.
Right. And let me just chime in there so that folks are aware. So when people are looking at shopping for generators, they typically have a wattage or a kW rating. And a kilowatt, kW, is just 1,000 watts. So a 5,000 watt generator is the same as a 5 kW generator. And what you're saying is that when people are looking at buying a generator, once you know how much power you need in your home, let's say you've got 2,000 watts of stuff that for whatever reason you want to run, but some of your stuff has a surge that means you momentarily need 4,000 watts.
Right.
But most of the time you're using 2,000 or less. What you're saying is you're going to have a generator that's sized for the 4,000 watt surge, but when generators run, they just run and they're giving you more power than you need if you're really using that lower amount. Is that what you're saying? You'll be running...
They're consuming more fuel than you need to create the power that you need.
Because you're oversizing the generator for that occasional spike.
Yeah.
And what you're seeing is people oftentimes aren't running anywhere close to even half of the generator's capacity.
Yeah. And then there's a problem with generators that are too small, which can be kind of disappointing because, those little battery backup Yeti units and other manufacturers make them, they don't tend to last as long as some of them say. One of the warnings I put out to people is, it says right here that it'll run my refrigerator for 23 hours. Well, do you got a brand new little 18 cubic foot unit, or do you got one of those giant, stainless steel, 5 foot wide, 10 feet tall units? Mm-hmm. Huge difference. And so it's difficult to know. And what will happen is one of those little Yeti generators, which is really not a generator at all, it's a battery and an inverter to convert the
is that
DC power
like Goal
to AC.
Zero and Yeti and a lot of these? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Goal Zero makes the Yeti, which has been a real popular option. But it's not likely to run very long. And it may not even run certain appliances if you're trying to put big surge loads into one of those. The others, so that's kind of on the undersizing side of things. If your well pump, you're trying to run it off a 2,000 watt generator and you've got a 400 foot deep well and a 1.5 horsepower motor, you're going to be sorely disappointed because you're going to flip the switch. Typically you want to turn the generator on first and then start plugging your loads in, so you don't have all these motors going on at the same time and exceeding the generator rating. So we kind of turn them on one at a time, these loads. And just the surge load from a well pump alone can break or at least, depending on the generator, turn the breaker off, just trying to start the darn thing up, and you're SOL, which I can't say in the radio, right?
Right. Well, you can say SOL.
Oh, okay. So So yeah, I mean, there's undersizing, there's oversizing, there's massive amounts of fuel consumption.
Safety with putting them inside garages and inside houses. And
we've got a long article on all the safety issues. And kind of related to that is there's a lot of generators that are going in unpermitted.
Yes.
So we've actually recently gone out and looked at 2 instances where people had received bids for generators, and they were putting them right by the side of the house. That was a proposal. But you got these crazy things called setbacks. And so we're working with the building department and trying to figure out if there's some way we can get variances in some simple way. But, if this company should come along and pop that generator right down there within the setback, then that's an issue. You can't build generators basically treated almost like a structure. You have to stay within setbacks, right?
A certain distance away from various
the
things.
Property line. Yeah. And, folks are putting them in underneath windows. And in the summertime, when you got an outage, you might have that window open. A company that I know here in town said, I think this is pretty wise advice. Treat the generator like a burn barrel. That's where you want to put it. You probably don't want it right next to your the natural gas line coming into your house. You probably want to respect those important clearances if you don't want to burn the thing up. You want to have it regularly maintained. I mean, it breaks my heart that a lot of people are running out and getting stuff that's either too big or too small.
Or unsafe.
Unsafe in particular. Yeah.
Well, and you've hammered on something that I think, we can help here at KVMR and with the Energy Report. And my concern is that this recent series of outages created a lot of panic. And it created a lot of fear and people rushing to make decisions that they might regret later. And I have a concern that next year when outages come, we might have worse problems with generators not performing correctly, generators starting fires, people disappointed that they spent a whole bunch of money and it's not running what they thought. And I really can't stress enough to folks that it's important to calm down and make reasonable, very educated decisions. And we're going to try and help with that because there really isn't anything that most companies can do immediately and right away. As Ray was talking about, a lot of the local experts that know about the grid and energy efficiency and all the other things that are involved in this, many of us are paying bills by spending a lot of time focusing on solar. And what we need to do is recognize that a lot of the people that can help you are so swamped right now because PG&E rates are already crazy and solar's lower than ever. So there's an unprecedented demand for that. And then, Ray, as you mentioned, at the end of every year, there's a tax credit deadline now. And that added even more fuel to the demand. And now with these outages, the companies, the electricians that are pulling permits and safely designing, installing generators, the local energy companies and solar outfits that know what they're doing and are taking the time to educate people, we're all really busy. And we're out till next year at this point. With Thanksgiving and Christmas coming up, it's just there's not a lot that's going to get done right away. And if someone is free and available, sometimes that's actually a red flag. If you're talking to an electrician that's like, I could get this done next week and I won't pull a permit or anything. So folks, just first focus on, as Ray mentioned, what do you really, really need during these outages? And we all just got a great lesson on how to get by with practically nothing. So protect yourself and make sure that you have your personal needs met. I've been referring to it as a stay kit. During fire season, you have to have a go bag to go. But now with blackout season, have a stay kit to be prepared to stay. Have your solar lights, have your water, your food, your ability to cook, your ability to take care of yourself. And that may not even require a generator or a battery or solar or anything.
Right.
And attack the efficiency first, and then we can start talking about a lot of these larger issues that really need to be discussed further. But the there's a lot of, would you say that there's a lot of confusion and interest surrounding just generator, battery, solar, that nexus of...
There's so much confusion, and like you, every single day, we and several of my coworkers will repeat the exact same thing over and over
yes.
and over again. And here we are, bludgeoned with work to begin with. So that's part of why I created the newsletter articles that we have had since June, why they're all published on the blog. It's a way of being able to say, check out our blog. I think it'll answer your questions. And they're sort of divided up into, generator or solar with battery backup and generator safety. So there's, some different topics that people can focus on. Adding battery backup to existing solar systems is another one. So a lot of the questions that we get every day are covered on that blog. And one thing I want to add to what you were saying is you've probably heard the saying, you can have it fast, you can have it cheap, you can have it done right. Pick two. I actually prefer affordable instead of cheap. But if you want it affordable and done right, it's not going to be fast. If you want it done fast and cheap, run out and buy a cheap generator, it's probably not going to be right. So fast, affordable, done right, pick two.
Yeah. Yeah, excellent.
That applies to a lot of stuff, actually.
Yeah. Well, and with we're about out of time. I do want to make mention of a couple of things happening today. But before I do, Ray, I know that this is one of the hardest questions to answer, but I think it's valuable because once people hear the numbers, it sort of changes their focus. What is even if it's a wide range, what's a ballpark range that you're seeing to provide backup power at the level people want, setting aside the fact that they might not need any of this? If they spent some time, they might be able to figure out, I can make it through this without having backup power. But because I'm sure you, just like me and all the other people in the community, we're giving out the same info over and over. And if you're experiencing what we're experiencing, when you finally give them a price, they go, oh, I'm good. But we do know that you can get small generators and small battery packs and do small devices to provide some small amount of power. But let's talk about, which you can get in many cases just online. You don't need to go to an energy expert. But so for the generator and the battery quotes that you're giving out repeatedly, what are you seeing as kind of a range? Because some people need small, some people need big. Because I think folks need to hear those numbers so that they can just begin understanding that you might need to rethink whether you can just go out and buy something. A lot of people are just, tell me what to buy.
Yeah.
We, as Americans, we just buy ourselves out of problems.
Well, you use the word want. That's kind of a dirty word.
Yeah.
From my experience recently. But as far as what people need,
no.
Then gets
but what do they
practical.
Want? What do they want? People are calling and saying, I want to be able to run this.
Yeah.
Give us a ballpark range.
Well, you're talking a home with a well pump and,
yes.
and all of that.
Yeah.
I would say, might start at around an additional $10,000.
Which one? For both, either batteries or generator?
For batteries, for a generator done right, not a portable generator, but one installed with a transfer switch.
With a permit?
You can get a proper transfer switch and a permit for around $1,500. Generators in general with a permit, again, which they have to be, might run anywhere from $11,000 to $20,000, depending on how much load, and surge load and so on.
So to do it right, $10,000 for each might be just a wild ballpark starting number.
Yeah, we're doing an off-grid home that's got all the fixings, well pump, septic pump, furnace. That's about, with generator, it's about an $80,000 system.
Okay, so wait, let me stop you there.
There's the high end.
So you just said that's off-grid because everyone's talking about that too.
Right.
How much does it cost for me to just get rid of PG&E? So you just said it's off-grid, solar, batteries, generator. That whole package, everything combined, done correctly with a permit, $80,000.
3 days, if the batteries are fully charged, 3 days before the generator has to come on, because that's the Nevada County rules when you pull permits for off-grid solar. But when PG&E goes away, you're basically off-grid solar, right?
So if people don't, because we're almost out of time, if people don't have a way to access $10,000 on credit card or financing or cash, generator and batteries are going to be out of reach for you right now.
If there's no access to financing.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, the caveat is that this is just intended to catch a good slice of the people that are calling right now. There's folks that are going to be off the charts in cost because of what their needs are, and there's going to be people that are going to be below that.
Well, you're going to have people saying, well, I read that Tesla's battery is like $6,000. And, well, yeah, but there's a bit more to it than that. You're going to have to put in, it's not going to run your whole house. And
that's not installation included.
You can get
usually
a couple of them,
right.
But then you're looking at, over 10 grand.
Right.
And then, not running your whole house, you're going to have to pull some circuits out of your main panel, put it in the critical load panel that's going to be served by the batteries. And so Tesla is great at marketing. So it's just an issue.
So there's nothing cheap and fast and easy if people are looking for some immediate thing like a lot of folks were in this panic. What's cheap and fast is figuring out how to use less. Because you can do that right away, and I'm pretty sure it usually costs you nothing to just figure out how to consume less.
Well, how much did your foam ice chest cost? Come on. That didn't come free.
Yeah. Well, before we run out of time, and I want to say thanks to my guest, Ray Darby from Sustainable Energy Group, SEG.energy, for more info, blogs, and I'm hoping that I can get him here on our future shows on the series of public power shutoffs from surviving to thriving. But before I forget, today at 2 o'clock at the, it's called the Banner Guild now. It used to be called the Banner Grange. 2 o'clock out at McCourtney Road, there is a speaker on hydrogen and solar for powering homes. He'll also be at the Madeline Helling Library tonight at 7:30. There's a sliding scale donation. And so, again, 2 o'clock at the Banner Guild and 7:30 tonight at Madeline Helling Library for folks that are interested in just educating themselves more about this. And again, I think it's important for everyone as you dive into becoming more energy aware, think of this as concentric circles, peeling back the onion. There's you and your immediate needs. There's the community around you. And then there's the longer term issues of what to do with this freaking grid that we've got going on here. But we're about out of time, and I need to say thanks really quickly. You'll recognize this person, Ray. Thanks goes out to Cayman Engineering of Nevada City, providing structural design services for remodels, additions, and new construction throughout Northern California. Cayman Engineering also offers engineering services for the solar industry worldwide. CaymanStructuralEngineering.com. Well, I wish that we had a 17-hour show that we could go into this, but what we do have is a monthly series here. So thanks for tuning in. We're going to be here the second Thursday of every month from noon to 6. And next month, I'm still working on what the subject matter is going to be because I have to make sure that the experts can be here at this time. So go to Facebook and like KVMR Energy Reports page. That's a place where you can get information. We'll be archiving these at kvmr.org, hoping to podcast them. But Ray, thanks so much for making time and doing everything you're doing. And again, that's SEG.energy, and we're going to be here every month providing you the information and news that you need in order to make it through these new, interesting times. You're tuned to KVMR FM, Nevada City KCPC Camino, 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 City KCPC